with trust and love, and welcome to Tales of Kind Souls, the place where stories of kindness, resilience, and humanity come to life. Today, we bring you an unforgettable story that took place high above the clouds, when a billionaire met a humble single dad who carried with him a secret gift, the ability to speak 7 languages. What unfolded on that flight is something you'll remember for a long time, a story that reminds us of the hidden treasures in everyday people and the beauty of human connection. The story begins on a quiet morning in New York City. At JFK Airport, the usual crowd of travelers filled the terminals. Among them was a man named Daniel, a single father in his early 30s, holding his daughter's hand tightly. His little girl, Sophia, was 7 years old, bright-eyed, with a smile that could melt away even the worst of moods. They were about to board a long flight to Geneva, Switzerland. Daniel wasn't rich, not in terms of money. In fact, life had been quite challenging for him. His wife had passed away years earlier after a long battle with illness, and since then, Daniel had dedicated his life to raising Sophia alone. He worked multiple jobs, teaching, translating, tutoring, to keep their small apartment and provide for her needs. And though money was always tight, Sophia never felt unloved. Her father gave her something priceless: his time, his attention, and his encouragement. But there was one remarkable thing about Daniel that most people didn't know. He could speak 7 languages fluently: English, Spanish, French, German, Italian, Arabic, and Mandarin. He had learned them through years of passion and necessity, often staying up late at night with books, recordings, and conversations with people he met along the way. Language was his window into the world, and it became both his livelihood and his joy. As Daniel and Sophia boarded the flight, little did they know that a man sitting in the first-class section was about to change their lives forever. That man's name was Charles Beaumont, a billionaire entrepreneur known for his vast empire of hotels and tech investments. Charles had it all: money, fame, luxury, but deep inside, he often felt something was missing. His life was filled with board meetings, deals, and lavish parties, but rarely did he encounter real, raw human stories that reminded him of what truly mattered. The plane took off smoothly, and for the first couple of hours, everything was ordinary. Daniel read a storybook to Sophia in English, his voice soft and soothing. She leaned her head against his arm, drifting into a nap. But soon something unusual happened. A flight attendant approached a passenger in distress. An elderly woman, seated a few rows behind Daniel, was struggling to communicate. She was visibly anxious, speaking rapidly in French, but the flight attendants couldn't understand her. They tried English, but it was clear the woman didn't know much of it. She gestured desperately, her voice trembling. Daniel, overhearing the commotion, gently excused himself. He walked over and began speaking to the woman in fluent French. Instantly, her face softened. Relief washed over her as Daniel patiently translated her concerns. She explained that she had left her heart medication in her luggage stored above, and she needed water to take her backup pills. Daniel relayed this calmly to the crew, and within moments everything was resolved. The woman squeezed his hand with gratitude, thanking him over and over in her native tongue. The flight attendants were impressed, but they thought perhaps Daniel just happened to know French. But a few hours later, another situation arose. A young couple from Spain was struggling to fill out their customs forms. They didn't understand English well enough, and they were starting to panic about entering Switzerland correctly. Daniel noticed their struggle, walked over, and with a warm smile began explaining everything in perfect Spanish. The couple's eyes lit up, and once again, a stressful situation turned into one of relief and gratitude. Now, passengers began to take notice. Who was this man who seemed to understand everyone? Charles, seated in first class but observing discreetly, was especially intrigued. He had seen Daniel switch languages as effortlessly as someone changes clothes. He leaned forward slightly, curious. A few hours later, during the meal service, a Chinese family seated across the aisle had difficulty communicating their dietary needs. The parents were speaking Mandarin. trying to explain that their son had severe allergies. Daniel, without hesitation, stepped in again. His Mandarin was precise and clear, and the family looked both shocked and overjoyed. Not only did he ensure the boy got the right food, but he also cracked a few light-hearted jokes in Mandarin that made the family laugh out loud. By this time, the entire section of the plane was buzzing with whispers about Daniel. Some people assumed he was a linguistics professor. Others thought he must be some kind of diplomat. But what impressed them most wasn't just his skill, it was his humility. He never bragged, never drew attention to himself. He simply helped, quietly returning to his seat with Sophia, who beamed with pride every time her father came back from helping someone. Charles couldn't hold back his curiosity anymore. After dinner, he walked back from first class and gently approached Daniel. "Excuse me," Charles said with a kind smile. "I couldn't help but notice. You seem to speak every language under the sun." "That's extraordinary," Daniel chuckled softly. "Not every language, just 7. Enough to get by." Charles raised his brows in amazement. 7? That's more than enough? Do you mind if I join you for a moment?" Daniel nodded, and Charles sat down beside him. They began to talk, and what started as small talk soon turned into something much deeper. Daniel shared his story, not in a self-pitying way, but with quiet honesty. He told Charles about losing his wife, about raising Sophia on his own, about working tirelessly to provide for her. He explained how learning languages wasn't just a skill for him, it was survival. It allowed him to work as a translator, a tutor, sometimes even a tour guide, whatever it took to earn enough. Charles listened intently. For a man who had spent his life in boardrooms and luxury hotels, this conversation was a rare breath of humanity. He looked at Sophia, who was leaning against her father.